With a rusty bicycle and a shirt frayed at the shoulders like yours, what right do you have to lecture our children about success? You are dragging the prestige of this school down, the PTA president, a woman reeking of expensive perfume, slammed her Hermes handbag onto the desk and pointed a finger directly at the young teacher. Around her, the group of wealthy Manhattan parents nodded in contemptuous approval. They had no idea that the teacher silently enduring this humiliation was not some destitute man needing a few dollars of salary to pay rent. He was the sole heir to a Texas oil dynasty, and the $100 million scholarship fund that this school was craving was entirely under his control. If you believe that knowledge and kindness cannot be measured by money, stay until the very last second. This plot twist will teach these snobs a lesson they will never forget. Teacher Matthew Vance, 28, appeared to be completely absorbed into the fast-paced, high-pressure life of middle-class workers in New York City. Every morning, before the fog had fully lifted off the Hudson River, he would quietly pedal his old iron-frame bicycle with rust on the chain, weaving through busy streets to get to school. He appeared at the staff office in simple black-rimmed glasses, a neat, unassuming haircut, and a coarse, light blue shirt that was slightly frayed at the cuffs, at the Greenwich International School in the heart of Manhattan, where annual tuition is a fortune and the parking lot is always packed with the expensive supercars of tycoons. Matthew was like a stranger. He was the homeroom teacher for Class 5A. To the children, he was not just a teacher standing at the podium, he was a great friend, a spiritual father. Matthew could spend hours after school refusing every party invitation from colleagues, just to sit in the empty classroom tutoring a boy who was a slow learner, or patiently listening to the trivial confidences of a child abandoned by parents amidst luxury. He worked with pure dedication, regardless of bonuses and without any concern for career advancement, but behind that modest, almost impoverished facade lay a truth that could shake the entire American elite. Matthew Vance did not need a teacher's salary to pay for his small apartment in Brooklyn. He was the sole legal heir to the Vance Energy Corporation, one of the oldest and most powerful oil dynasties in Texas, holding the lifeline of the global energy industry. After graduating with honors in education and philosophy from the prestigious Oxford University, instead of putting on formal attire and sitting in the lavish chairman's seat in a Houston skyscraper to run billion-dollar deals, Matthew chose to give it all up. He left behind his unlimited black cards, private jets, and flashy fame to come to New York under a simple name. This peculiar decision of his stemmed from a promise, a sacred dying wish to his late mother before she passed away. Matthew's mother was a teacher in a poor countryside village before marrying his father. She had always seen the rod of money when it began to interfere with the souls of children. She had once grabbed his hand and said with a choked voice, "Matthew, education is never a tool to divide classes, or to turn wealthy children into masters. It must be the most equitable lighthouse, leading every soul to find its true value. Promise me. Use knowledge to protect the children before money, full of schemes, stains them." That promise was the reason Matthew was at Greenwich. He wanted to use the eyes of someone at the lowest level to see how the elite education system his family funded annually actually operated. He wanted to see the pure smiles of students when they absorbed knowledge with honesty, not with hypocrisy and lies. He hid his identity, accepted the contempt of colleagues, accepted the avoidant looks of parents, all in exchange for the sincerity of the children. Yet, Matthew did not know that his altruism and patience were about to face a wall of cruel arrogance. A toxic environment where people were ready to crush a teacher's personality just because he didn't own a luxury car. The Greenwich International School had long since lost the purity of an educational institution. Behind the ancient Gothic architecture, red brick walls covered in romantic vines, and teaching equipment worth millions of dollars, this place had been gnawed away by the poison called the wealth-based hierarchy of the Manhattan elite. Money here had supreme power. It crept into every classroom, shaped the attitudes of teachers, and warped the minds of children barely 10 years old. The school board, headed by the headmaster and CEO, had abandoned their pedagogical duty to become intermediaries for money. They looked at students not through merit or ethics, but through the number of zeros on the donation checks their families signed at the beginning of each semester. Teachers at Greenwich were trained in a hidden skill, learning to turn a blind eye to the misconduct of wealthy princes and princesses, knowing how to smile and accept the condescension of parents, and most importantly, knowing how to turn grades into a commodity that could be bought under the table. Leading this toxic wave was Mrs. Victoria Sterling, the PTA president and a major donor to the school, and also the mother of Julian Sterling, a troublesome student in Class 5A, which Matthew homeroomed. Julian was the perfect embodiment of a flawed education. The boy was only 10, but he already possessed the cruel arrogance of someone who believed money could erase every sin. Julian frequently used limited edition tech gadgets or unreleased designer shoes to isolate and bully classmates in lower financial situations. Once, Matthew witnessed Julian intentionally pour a whole carton of chocolate milk over the old backpack of a poor scholarship student, then casually pull out a stack of cash and throw it right in the poor boy's face with a cold-blooded declaration. "My family could buy out this entire school. What is this piece of trash backpack worth? Take the money and shut up." When Matthew demanded that other teachers record the incident, they only looked at him with uncomfortable eyes and tried to avoid it. The English teacher next to him even whispered in his ear, "Mr. Vance, be less realistic. Last week, Mrs. Victoria donated a new physics lab. If you make a big deal out of this, the headmaster won't let you be. Learn to compromise if you still want to receive a salary." They even secretly fixed Julian's failing test scores into perfect A's to please the Sterling family at fundraising parties. Only Matthew was the one who refused to bow to that dirty rulebook. In the 5A classroom, he established a completely different set of rules. All children are equal. When Julian cheated or bullied others, Matthew was ready to give him an F and require him to stay after school, holding the mop himself to clean the classroom as a proper punishment. He didn't do it out of hatred. He did it because he wanted to salvage the bit of humanity left in a child who was being destroyed by excessive indulgence. However, Matthew's integrity was like a sharp thorn stuck in the eye of Queen Victoria Sterling. To a woman accustomed to using power to manipulate a corner of New York, having her son punished by a dirt-poor teacher who rode an old bike and wore a frayed shirt was an intolerable insult. The toxic culture of Greenwich was swirling, accumulating the resentment of the snobs, waiting for a reason to crush this solitary teacher. The battle erupted late in the afternoon of the end-of-term parent-teacher conference, when the last rays of New York's sun weakly filtered through the large glass windows, trying to light up the 5A classroom but failing. The space inside was so suffocating that even a heavy breath could shake the atmosphere. It all stemmed from a bright red F, lying lonely and proud on Julian Sterling's math test, an undeniable result for blatant cheating recorded by the classroom camera. The classroom door was pushed open roughly. Mrs. Victoria Sterling stepped in, trailing a cold gust of rage and the stench of expensive perfume. Following her was a group of wealthy Manhattan parents, those who always viewed life through the lens of donation checks. Victoria did not bother sitting in the chair reserved for parents. She walked straight to the teacher's desk and slammed her limited edition crocodile skin Hermes bag onto the wooden surface, creating a jarring sound that echoed throughout the room. "Mr. Vance, how do you explain this piece of trash?" Victoria pointed her bright red painted finger at the test paper with the F, her voice hissing through her teeth, sharp and domineering. "My son is a genius. He is destined to enter Ivy League schools. He cannot receive a humiliating F from someone with a destitute background." Riding a rusty iron frame bike like you, Matthew remained seated on his simple wooden chair. He did not stand up to create a confrontation. Nor did he avoid the eyes burning with rage from the woman opposite him. He gently took off his black-rimmed glasses and placed them on the table, revealing eyes that were bright, deep, and strangely calm. Student Julian used a microtech device to copy the work of the person next to him. "Mrs. Sterling," Matthew replied, his voice deep, steady, and without a single tremor before that rage. "In this classroom and in the world outside, honesty is always a foundation more important than any grade. I did not grade Julian's ability. I gave an F for his moral character. Honesty? That empty theory of you poor people?" Victoria sneered, a laugh full of contempt and condescension. "Does that buy you a car to shelter from the rain and sun? Or does it just help you cling to that ragged bike to comfort yourself for your own failures?" She leaned forward, hands pressed onto the desk, thrusting her heavily made-up face toward Matthew, intentionally lowering her tone but increasing the cruelty so the group of parents behind and a few colleagues peeking outside the hallway could hear. "Listen clearly, Mr. Vance. I have had a very definitive talk with the headmaster. A ragged, dirt-poor guy with a conservative mindset like you is seriously affecting the image, feng shui, and prestige of our children. We donate millions of dollars to this school every year, not so a poor guy can teach our children to live honestly in a poor way. Either you sign the resignation letter today and leave quietly, or I will use the entire influence of the Sterling family to make sure you cannot even get a job cleaning trash anywhere in this America." The wealthy parents around immediately roared with laughter, casting disgusted looks at Matthew's coarse, light blue shirt that was slightly frayed at the cuffs. They whispered and pointed at his faded sneakers as if he were a type of bacteria polluting their elite sanctuary. A few teachers standing at the door shook their heads in discomfort. They looked at Matthew with pity for someone who was upright but foolish. Daring to hit an egg against a rock, faced with all the insults, public humiliation, and threats that could ruin an ordinary person's future. Matthew Vance did not change his expression. He did not stand up to argue, did not offer a single word of explanation or justification. And absolutely no flicker of anger appeared in his eyes. He looked straight at the face twisted with arrogance of Victoria, then looked at the smirking faces of the group of elite parents. Deep in his heart, Matthew did not feel humiliated. He only felt a deep sadness and pity. He pitied children like Julian, those young shoots being poisoned by their own parents with a money is supreme mindset, depriving them of the opportunity to learn how to be a decent human being before learning how to be a rich person. Matthew sighed very softly, pulled the desk drawer, and took out the resignation form that the headmaster had prepared according to Victoria's orders. He held a $2 ballpoint pen and slowly signed his name, each stroke decisive and calm. The patience of the Vance family heir had reached its final limit, and he understood that this game of anonymity should end here to make way for a proper purge. The greatest cruelty of those who call themselves the elite is not just stopping at trampling on the self-respect of a worker, but also how they turn that cruelty into a glorious trophy to applaud themselves. For Victoria Sterling, kicking a stubborn, dirt-poor teacher out of her son's life was not just a personal victory, it was a firm affirmation of the world order she always believed in, where money is always the supreme law and the power of the USD can bend every moral standard. As soon as the heels of Victoria's expensive shoes hit the floor with decisive clicks out of the 5A classroom door, she immediately pulled out her gold-plated limited edition iPhone, with a triumphant smile widening on her lips. Her red-painted fingers glided quickly over the touchscreen, drafting a message full of condescending tone and sending it straight into the common group chat of the entire Greenwich School PTA. The poor teacher who liked to preach has been officially kicked out of Greenwich, Victoria wrote, each word reeking of contempt. The resignation letter has been signed. From now on, our children will be protected from that poverty mindset and will be taught by people with real status. Kindness cannot buy a future for children in Manhattan. Within minutes, Victoria's phone vibrated incessantly with hundreds of messages expressing praise, icons of cheering, and words hailing her as a hero who had just cleaned the school of a dirty stain. The blind obedience of the crowd only fueled the fire of complacency burning in the chest of the arrogant woman. That evening, Victoria's complacency reached its peak when she held a lavish gala at her $40 million duplex penthouse, looking straight out over the brightly lit Central Park. The guests were all big names in the New York financial world, the wealthiest parents of Greenwich School, wearing expensive haute couture outfits and diamond necklaces sparkling under the crystal chandelier. Victoria stood at the center of the party, one hand holding a glass of premium Burgundy wine that cost an entire year's salary of an average teacher, the other hand casually stroking the hair of her son Julian, standing next to her with a cocky look. She was immersed in the congratulations, casually recounting the story of this afternoon like an amusing entertainment. Did you see his face when he signed the resignation? Victoria laughed, her voice echoing throughout the lavish space of the room. He stood there stunned, clinging to his old, frayed shirt as if it were his only lifebuoy. A guy on a rusty bike will forever belong to muddy roads. Yet he dared to fantasize about using 2 words, honesty, to lecture the son of the Sterling family. God has divided classes very clearly right from the moment we were born. The job of those at the bottom of society is to obey, not to stand at the podium to judge those who are feeding this society. Julian, standing next to her, also tilted his chin up triumphantly, turning to say to other rich kids, "Tomorrow I will throw that F test into the trash right in front of the headmaster. Let's see from now on if any poor guy dares to give me a bad grade again." The sounds of chatter and clinking crystal glasses rang out joyfully, mingling with the gentle classical music, creating a perfect picture of the vanity of the super-rich. Victoria Sterling at this moment felt like a queen standing at the top of the world, holding the power of life and death in her hands. She confidently declared to everyone that tomorrow, at the Greenwich School's anniversary celebration, she would be the brightest star when representing all parents to stand on the podium side by side with the supreme representative of the Vance Energy Corporation to sign the $100 million scholarship fund. That was the huge investment fund that determined the fate, reputation, and survival of this school for the next decade. Victoria Sterling sipped the wine, her eyes looking through the floor-to-ceiling glass wall down at the cars that looked like matchboxes moving on the streets of New York deep below. She was completely unaware that the teacher wearing the frayed shirt she had just insulted, the man she had just forced to sign a resignation letter, was the one holding the supreme key to that $100 million fund. And just a few hours from now, when the dawn broke over the Manhattan sky, the castle of illusions built by her arrogance would be crushed into pieces by that very poor teacher, 9 o'clock the next morning. The main hall of the Greenwich International School was decorated brilliantly and gorgeously like a royal theater to welcome the 20th anniversary. Symphonic music played from the live orchestra in the corner of the stands, red carpets stretched from the parking lot to the podium, and fresh flower baskets imported from the Netherlands radiated sweet scents throughout the space. The entire elite of Manhattan, from politicians, Wall Street bankers to the most powerful parents, were all gathered under the brilliant crystal chandeliers. At the most solemn position in the front row, the headmaster and CEO stood next to Mrs. Victoria Sterling. Both were wearing their most gorgeous outfits in preparation for the most important moment in the history of the school. Victoria wore a custom-tailored evening gown from Paris, her neck adorned with a sparkling pearl necklace, her skillfully made-up face unable to hide her extreme complacency. She was casually chatting while adjusting the tie for her son Julian, who was standing next to her with a cocky look. "I heard the mysterious young heir of the supreme Vance family flew from Texas to New York last night." The headmaster leaned close to Victoria's ear, whispering in a tone trembling with excitement, sweat beads forming on his forehead. "This $100 million scholarship signing ceremony will elevate Greenwich to a completely new level. And the parent representative standing on stage with me to sign is none other than you, Mrs. Sterling. The Sterling family and the Vance Corporation combined, we will dominate New York education." Victoria Sterling slightly curled her lips, her eyes filled with pride. "That's right, headmaster. A prestigious school must be run by prestigious brains and huge money, not by the poor, honest mindset of ragged teachers." She glanced at the empty chair at the end of the teacher's row, where Matthew Vance should have been sitting, then let out a smirk full of satisfaction. That rusty bike guy at this hour must be struggling to file for unemployment in some dark corner of Brooklyn. Suddenly, 3 deep and powerful car horn blasts sounded from the main gate, cutting through the symphony. The entire hall immediately fell into a strange silence, every eye simultaneously turned toward the large revolving glass door. A convoy of shiny black Rolls-Royce Phantoms, led by 2 armored SUVs of the private security team, slowly moved onto the red carpet. The car doors opened, 10 muscular bodyguards wearing flat, black suits quickly stepped out, forming a horizontal line to create an isolated barrier, completely separating the curious crowd. The professionalism and invisible pressure from the convoy made the billionaires present in the hall instinctively step back a step respectfully. The global CEO of the Vance Energy Corporation stepped out of the lead car. He did not bother looking at the headmaster or Victoria, who were hurrying to rush out to greet him. He walked straight to the central Rolls-Royce, bent his body at a 90-degree angle respectfully, one hand placed on the edge of the door to shield it, the other respectfully opening the car door. "Mr. Chairman, we have arrived," the CEO spoke, his voice echoing through the freezing atmosphere of the hall, when the Oxford leather shoes, polished so well that one could see their reflection, were placed on the red carpet. The entire hall seemed to fall into a black hole of terror. The person stepping out of the car was not an elderly tycoon from Texas as they had imagined. It was a young man possessing a tall stature, broad, firm shoulders, and a royal aura that overwhelmed the entire space. He was wearing a 3-piece suit custom-tailored from Savile Row worth tens of thousands of dollars, a Patek Philippe watch sparkling on his wrist, and hair slicked back elegantly. No more simple black-rimmed glasses, no more rusty bicycle. That man held his head high, his eyes cold as ice scanning the crowd. It was Matthew Vance. Mrs. Victoria Sterling stood frozen in place. The crystal glass held in her hand slipped from her red-painted fingers, falling onto the Italian marble floor and shattering into thousands of pieces. The headmaster nearly collapsed, both knees trembling violently, his face drained of all color. Julian, standing next to them, opened his mouth wide. The ragged teddy bear of a poor student he intended to bring out to tease fell under his feet. The complacency, Victoria's elite kingdom. The headmaster's CEO chair, and all the cruel insults of yesterday afternoon, in a short tenth of a second, had turned into a guillotine of justice hanging right over their heads. The poor teacher they had just kicked out was now walking on the red carpet as the supreme king of this entire empire. The entire hall of the Greenwich International School fell into a state of deathly silence. The kind of silence that only appears when a horrific truth has just been exposed to the light. Mrs. Victoria Sterling stood frozen in place. Her breathing rapid, her chest heaving violently under her expensive evening gown. Her eyes widened to their full extent. Her pupils constricted when looking at the man striding with authority toward the podium. The brain of the arrogant woman tried to refuse to process this absurd reality. The poor teacher, the one she called trash, the one forced to sign the resignation letter in humiliation yesterday afternoon, was now the supreme heir of a multi-billion-dollar financial empire. The headmaster next to her completely collapsed mentally. His legs went soft, losing all color, having to clutch the edge of the wooden table to keep his body from falling to the marble floor. Julian Sterling, usually cocky, now trembled, hiding behind his mother's back, his eyes full of fear looking at the teacher he had once openly bullied. Matthew Vance did not bother glancing at Victoria or the headmaster. He swept past them as if they were just empty voids. Matthew stepped onto the podium, adjusting the shining gold microphone. When he raised his head, his eyes as cold as ice were fixed straight at the entire audience, where hundreds of eyes of the Manhattan elite were looking at him with immense horror and reverence. "Mr. Headmaster, managers, and all parents present today," Matthew spoke. His voice was deep, calm, but carried the weight of a large mountain, echoing through every corner of the hall through the central speaker system. "Today, I stand here as the supreme administrator of the Vance Education Fund, the person who holds the final decision on the $100 million grant that this school has been waiting for the past year." Matthew paused for a beat. He raised his hand to adjust the sleeve of his Savile Row suit, his eyes slowly scanning the faces of the parents who yesterday had joined in the contemptuous laughter. "Yesterday afternoon, right in the 5A classroom, someone asked me if honesty and self-respect could buy a car to shelter from the rain and sun," Matthew continued, the pace of his speech extremely slow but firm. "Today in this hall I have an official answer for you. Honesty and self-respect truly cannot buy a car, but it determines whether the Vance family continues to invest a single cent into a place that has been rotten from the very roots like this." Mrs. Victoria Sterling heard this, her hands trembling. The gold-plated phone in her hand fell onto the floor. She stammered, trying to squeeze out a weak voice. "Mr. Vance, I didn't know you were. It was just a misunderstanding. I was just worried about my son's education." "Shut up, MRS. Sterling," the headmaster suddenly turned to roar, cutting off Victoria's plea. His face was twisted with fear. He fell to his knees right below Matthew's podium, bowing his head repeatedly. "Mr. Vance, Mr. Chairman, I was blinded by this woman. She used the power of the PTA to force me to fire you. I am innocent. Please do not withdraw the funding. Please do not destroy this school." Matthew looked at the headmaster, bowing at his feet with extreme contempt. "You are not innocent, headmaster," Matthew said, his voice heavy, the power in his words making the headmaster freeze immediately. "You abandoned the vocation of a teacher to become a slave to money. You closed your eyes to the bullying behavior of rich kids. You fixed grades for Julian Sterling in exchange for gorgeous labs, and you were ready to sign a firing letter for an upright teacher just to please a parent with money. A school like this does not deserve to be called a place of education." Matthew turned back to the microphone, declaring loudly to the entire assembly, "From this moment on, the Vance Energy Corporation officially cancels the $100 million scholarship fund and withdraws all funding for the Greenwich International School. At the same time, as the shareholder owning the land where this school is located, I require the board to replace the headmaster position immediately. You are fired. And all financial records under your management will be transferred straight to the State Audit Office to investigate for bribery." The headmaster heard the sentence and collapsed onto the red carpet, fainting in panic. Matthew turned his razor-sharp gaze toward Victoria Sterling, who was standing trembling like a leaf before a winter wind. "And as for you, Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice cold to the bone, "you are proud of your status and money. You use it to oppress and threaten others. Then from tomorrow all banks, investment funds, and energy partners under the Vance Family Alliance in New York will terminate all economic contracts with your family's corporation. Let's see how long that status bought by money you are so complacent about will last when no one wants to work with the Sterling family. And student Julian, Matthew looked down at the 10-year-old child crying uncontrollably out of fear. You need to learn how to be an honest human being again before learning elite knowledge. From tomorrow, the name of Julian Sterling and the children of all parents who participated in the humiliation of the teacher yesterday will be put on the blacklist. Permanently refused admission at any private school associated with our education fund in New York. You have money, right? Then take your money and go build a school for your children yourselves. Matthew's final ruling just finished. A group of security guards in black suits stepped up without a shred of respect, gripping the two arms of Victoria Sterling and the arrogant parents, inviting them out of the hall immediately. Victoria walked away in extreme embarrassment and humiliation under the whispering, pointing, and cold looks of hundreds of honorable guests who had praised her the night before. The castle of illusions of arrogance had collapsed completely under the feet of the teacher they once looked down on. An old, rusty iron-frame bicycle has never spoken to the huge fortune of a person, but a frayed shirt can completely hide a great personality. The true value of a teacher is measured by the amount of knowledge they pass on and the souls they mold, never measured by the balance in a parent's account. Arrogance based on money is just a thin veil full of illusions, and when that veil is torn down, the price to pay for condescension will be extremely expensive. The storm that passed through the Greenwich School Hall today left a costly lesson for the Manhattan elite. Money can buy skyscrapers, limited edition handbags, or gorgeous labs, but it can never buy the dignity of a teacher. Matthew Vance chose to give up the glory of a tycoon's heir to stand at the podium, because he understood that education is the lighthouse of equality. When that lighthouse is dirtied by money, he is ready to use his own supreme power to crush the hypocrisy and return purity to the children. Mrs. Victoria Sterling and the headmaster had to pay with both their careers and reputations for their excessive arrogance. Now, when there is no longer a $100 million funding source, Greenwich will have to face decay by itself. And children like Julian will have to learn how to walk on their own feet, instead of hiding behind the shadows of powerful money. That is a completely satisfying and deserved ending for the law of cause and effect in life. Dear audience, what do you think about the century's plot twist of teacher Matthew Vance? Is the punishment of withdrawing the entire $100 million funding and blacklisting the group of arrogant parents a proper lesson to awaken those who always consider money to be everything? Leave your opinions and feelings right below in the comments section. We really want to hear the perspective from you. If the story today has brought you moments of suspense, satisfaction, and strengthened your belief in fairness in life, then don't forget to press the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to continue building the next dramatic, humanistic, and deep scripts. Thank you for spending time accompanying us to the final moments of the video. Goodbye and see you again in the next top-notch plot twist stories.